Hello, everyone. Sorry I'm late. My son woke up. Good to be back. Tonight we're going to start reading chapter 5 of the Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. It's getting pretty good. In the last chapter, Bod went out into the world for the first time. He was looking to buy a headstone for the witch of the graveyard. He's got a little crush on her. But then he experiences the outside world and it's dangerous. He almost gets kidnapped, and luckily the witch comes by and helps him get out. And he gets out with his own ingenuity too. Silas catches him in the street and takes him back, but it's a close call. So let's see how he reacts. Chapter 5 is called Dance Macabre. Something was going on. Bod was certain of it. It was there in the crisp winter air, in the stars, in the wind, in the darkness. It was there in the rhythms of the long nights and the fleeting days. Miss Owens pushed him out of the Owens' little tomb. Get along with you, she said. I've got business to attend to. Bod looked at his mother. But it's cold out there, he said. I should hope so, she said. It being winter, that's as it should be. Now, she said more to herself than to Bod. Shoes, and look at this dress. It needs hemming and cobwebs. There are cobwebs all over. For heaven's sakes, you get along. This to Bod once more. I've plenty to be getting on with, and I don't need you underfoot. And then she sang to herself a little couplet Bod had never heard before. Rich man, poor man, come away, come dance the macabre. What's that? Asked Bod, but it was the wrong thing to have said, for Miss Owens looked dark as the thundercloud, and Bod hurried out of the tomb before she could express her displeasure more forcefully. It was cold in the graveyard, cold and dark, and the stars were already out. Bod passed Mother Slaughter in the ivy-covered Egyptian walk, squinting at the greenery. Your eyes are younger than mine, young man, she said. Can you see blossom? Blossom in winter? Don't you look at me with that face on it, young man, she said. Things blossom in their time. They bud and blossom and fade. Everything in its time. She huddled deeper into her cloak and bonnet and said, Time to work and time to play, time to dance the macabre. Eh, boy? I don't know, said Bod. What's the macabre? But Mother Slaughter had pushed into the ivy and was gone from sight. How odd, said Bod aloud. He sought warmth and company in the bustling Bartleby mausoleum, but the Bartleby family, 7 generations of them, had no time for him that night. They were cleaning and tidying, all of them, from the oldest to the youngest. Fortinbras Bartleby, 10 years old when he died of consumption, he had told Bod, who had mistakenly believed for several years that Fortinbras had been eaten by lions or bears, and was extremely disappointed to learn it was merely a disease, now apologized to Bod. We cannot stop to play, Master Bod, for soon enough tomorrow night comes. How often can a man say that? Every night, said Bod. Tomorrow night always comes. Not this one, said Fortinbras. Not once in a blue moon, or a month of Sundays. It's not Guy Fawkes night, said Bod, or Halloween. It's not Christmas or New Year's Day. Fortinbras smiled, a huge smile that filled his pie-shaped, freckly face with joy. None of them, he said. This one's special. What's it called? Asked Bod. What happens tomorrow? It's the best day, said Fortinbras, and Bod was certain he would have continued, but his grandmother, Louisa Bartleby, who was only 20, called him over to her and said something sharply in his ear. Nothing, said Fortinbras. Then to Bod, sorry, I have to work now. And he took a rag and began to buff the side of his dusty coffin with it. La 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 he sang la 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 With each he would do a wild, whole-body flourish with his rag. Aren't you going to sing that song? What song? When everybody's singing. No time for that, said Fortinbras. It's tomorrow after all. No time, said Louisa, who had died in childbirth giving birth to twins. Be about your business. and in her sweet, clear voice she sang, "One and all will hear and stay. Come and dance the macabre." Bod walked down to the crumbling little church. He slipped between the stones and into the crypt, where he sat and waited for Silas to return. He was cold, true, but the cold did not bother Bod. Not really. The graveyard embraced him, and the dead do not mind the cold. His guardian returned in the small hours of the morning and had a large plastic bag with him. "What's in there?" "Clothes for you. Try them on." Silas produced a gray sweater and the color of Bod's winding shirt, a pair of jeans, underwear, and shoes, pale green sneakers. "What are they for?" "You mean apart from wearing?" "Well, firstly, I think you're old enough. What are you, 10 years old now? And normal, living people clothes are wise. You'll have to wear them one day, so why not pick up the habit right now? They could also be camouflage." "What's camouflage?" "When something looks enough like something else that people watching don't know what it is they're looking at." "Oh, I see, I think." Bod put the clothes on. The shoelaces gave him a little trouble, and Silas had to teach him how to tie them. It seemed remarkably complicated to Bod, and he had to tie and retie his laces several times before he had done it to Silas's satisfaction. Only then did Bod dare to ask his question. "Silas, what's a macabre?" Silas's eyebrows raised, and his head tipped to one side. "Where did you hear about that?" "Everyone in the graveyard is talking about it. I think it's something that happens tomorrow night." "What's a macabre?" "It's a dance," said Silas. "Almost danced the macabre," said Bod, remembering. "Have you danced it? What kind of dance is it?" His guardian looked at him with eyes like black pools and said, "I do not know. I know many things, Bod, for I've been walking the earth at night for a very long time, but I do not know what it is like to dance the macabre. You must be alive or you must be dead to dance it, and I am neither." Bod shivered. He wanted to embrace his guardian, to hold him, and to tell him he would never desert him, but the action was unthinkable. He could no more hug Silas than he could hold a moonbeam, not because his guardian was insubstantial, but because it would be wrong. There were people you could hug, and then there was Silas. His guardian inspected Bod thoughtfully, a boy in his new clothes. "You'll do," he said. "Now, you look like you've lived outside the graveyard all your time." Bod smiled proudly, then the smile stopped and he looked grave once again. He said, "But you'll always be here, Silas, won't you? And won't and I won't ever have to leave if I don't want to." "Everything in its season," said Silas, and he said no more that night. Bod woke early the next day when the sun was a sliver of coin high in the gray winter sky. It was too easy to sleep through the hours of the daylight, spend all his winter in one long night, and never see the sun. So each night before he slept, he would promise himself that he would wake in the daylight and leave the Owens' cozy tomb. There was a strange scent in the air, sharp and floral. Bod followed it up the hill to the Egyptian walk, where the winter ivy hung in green tumbles, an evergreen tangle that hid mock Egyptian walls and statues and hieroglyphs. The perfume was heaviest there. For a moment, Bod wondered if snow might have fallen, for there were white clusters on the greenery. Bod examined a cluster more closely. It was made of small five-petaled flowers, and he had just put his head in to sniff the perfume when he heard footsteps coming up the path. Bod faded into the ivy and watched. 3 men and a woman, all alive, came up the path into the Egyptian walk. The woman had an ornate chain around her neck. "Is this it?" she asked. "Yes, Miss Carroway," said one of the men, chubby and white-haired and short of breath. Like each of the men, he carried a large, empty wicker basket. She seemed both vague and puzzled. "Well, if you say so," she said, "but I cannot say that I understand it." She looked up at the flowers. "What do I do now?" The smallest of the men reached into his wicker basket and brought out a tarnished pair of silver scissors. "The scissors, Lady Mayoress," he said. She took the scissors from him and began to cut clumps of blossom, and she and the 3 men started to fill baskets with the flowers. "This is," said Miss Carroway, the Lady Mayoress, after a while. "Perfectly ridiculous." "It is," said the fat man. "A tradition." "Perfectly ridiculous," said Miss Carroway, "but she continued to cut the white blossoms and drop them into the wicker baskets. When they had filled the first basket, she asked, "Isn't that enough?" "We need to fill all 4 baskets," said the smaller man, "and distribute a flower to everyone in the old town." "What kind of tradition is that?" said Miss Carraway. "I asked the Lord Mayor before me, and he said he'd never heard of it." Then she said, "You get the feeling someone's watching us?" "What?" said the third man, who had not spoken until now. He had a beard and a turban and 2 wicker baskets. "Ghosts, you mean? I do not believe in ghosts." "Not ghosts," said Miss Carraway, "just a feeling like someone's looking." Bod fought the urge to push farther back into the ivy. "It's not surprising that the previous Lord Mayor did not know about this tradition," said the chubby man, whose basket was almost full. "The first time the winter blossoms have bloomed in 80 years." The man with the beard and turban, who did not believe in ghosts, was looking around him nervously. "Everyone in Old Town gets a flower," said the small man. "Man, woman, and child." Then he said slowly, as if he were trying to remember something he had learned a very long time ago, "One to leave and one to stay, all to dance the macabre." Miss Carraway sniffed. "Stuff and nonsense," she said, and kept on snipping the blossoms. Dusk fell early in the afternoon, and it was night, 4:30. Bod wandered the paths of the graveyard, looking for someone to talk to. There was no one about. He walked down to the potter's field to see if Liza Hempstock was about, but found no one there. He went back to the Owens' tomb, but found it also deserted. Neither his father nor Mistress Owens was anywhere to be seen. Panic started then, a low-level panic. It was the first time in his 10 years that Bod could remember feeling abandoned in the place he had always thought of as his home. He ran down the hill to the old chapel where he waited for Silas. Silas did not come. "Perhaps I missed him," thought Bod, but he did not believe this. He walked up the hill to the very top and looked out. The stars hung in the chilly sky, while the patterned lights of the city spread below him, street lights and car headlights and things in motion. He walked slowly down from the hill until he reached the graveyard's main gates, and he stopped there. He could hear music. Bod had listened to all kinds of music, the sweet chimes of the ice cream van, the songs that played on the workmen's radios, the tunes that Clarity Jake played the dead on his dusty fiddle. But he had never heard anything like this before. A series of deep swells, like the music at the beginning of something, a prelude perhaps, or an overture. He slipped through the locked gates, walked down the hill and into the old town, past the Lady Mayoress standing on the corner as he watched. She reached out and pinned a little white flower to the lapel of a passing businessman. "I don't make charitable donations," said the man. "I leave that to the office." "It's not for charity," said Miss Carraway. "It's a local tradition." "Ah," he said. He pushed his chest out, displaying the little flower to the world, and walked off, proud as Punch. A young woman pushing a baby buggy was the next to go past. "What's it for?" she asked, suspiciously, as the mayoress approached. "One for you and one for the little one," said the mayoress. She pinned the flower to the young woman's winter coat, stuck the flower for the baby in its coat to its coat with tape. "But what's it for?" asked the young woman. "It's an old town thing," said the lady mayoress vaguely. "Some sort of tradition." Bod walked on. Everywhere he went, he saw people wearing the white flowers. On the other street corners, he passed men who had been with the lady mayoress, each man with a basket, handing out white flowers. Not everyone took a flower, but most people did. The music was still playing somewhere at the edge of perception, solemn and strange. Bod cocked his head to one side, trying to locate where it was coming from, without success. It was in the air and all around. It was playing in the flapping of the flags and awnings, in the rumble of distant traffic, click of heels on the dry paving stones. And there was an oddness, Bod thought, as he watched the people heading home. They were walking in time to the music. The man with the beard and the turban was almost out of flowers. Bod walked over to him. "Excuse me," said Bod. The man started. "I did not see you," he said accusingly. "Sorry," said Bod. "Can I have a flower as well?" The man with the turban looked at Bod with suspicion. "Do you live around here?" he asked. "Oh, yes," said Bod. The man passed Bod a white flower. Bod took it and said, "Ow!" Something stabbed into the base of his thumb. "You pin it to your coat," said the man. "Watch out for the pin." A bead of crimson was coming up on Bod's thumb. He sucked at it while the man pinned the flower to Bod's sweater. I've never seen you around here, he told Bod. I live here all right, said Bod. What are the flowers for? It was a tradition in the old town, said the man, before the city grew up around it. When the winter flowers bloom in the graveyard on the hill, they are cut and given out to everybody, man or woman, old or young, rich and poor. The music was louder now. Bod wondered if he could hear it better because he was wearing the flower. He could make out a beat like distant drums, or a skirling, hesitant melody that made him want to pick up his heels and march in time to the sound. Bod had never walked anywhere as a sightseer before. He had forgotten the prohibitions on leaving the graveyard, forgotten that tonight in the graveyard on the hill the dead were no longer in their places. All that he thought of was the old town. He trotted through it down to the municipal gardens in front of the old town hall, which was now a museum and tourist information center, the town hall itself having moved into the much more imposing, if newer and duller offices halfway across the city. There were already people around, wandering the municipal gardens, now in midwinter, little more than a large grassy field, with here and there some steps, a shrub, a statue. Bod listened to the music, entranced. There were people trickling into the square, in ones and twos, in families or alone. He had never seen so many living people at one time. There must have been hundreds of them, all of them breathing, each of them alive as he was, each with a white flower. Is this what living people do? Thought Bod. But he knew that it was not, that this, whatever it was special. The young woman he had seen earlier pushing the baby buggy stood beside him, holding her baby, swaying her head to the music. How long does the music go on for? Asked Bod. But she said nothing, just swayed and smiled. Bod did not think she smiled much normally, and only when he was certain that she had not heard him, that he had faded, or was simply not someone she cared enough to listen to, she said, Blimmin' heck, it's like Christmases. She said it like a woman in a dream, as if she was seeing herself from the outside. In the same not really there tone of voice, she said, puts me in mind of me grand's sister, Aunt Clara. And every before Christmas we'd go to her after me grand passed away, and she'd play music on her old piano, and she'd sing sometimes, and we'd eat chocolates and nuts, and I can't remember any of the songs she sung, but that music, it's like all of them songs playing at once. The baby seemed asleep with its head on her shoulder, but even the baby was swaying its hands gently in time to the music. And then the music stopped, and there was silence in the square, a muffled silence, like the silence of falling snow, all noise swallowed by the night, and the bodies in the square, no one stamping or shuffling, scarcely even breathing. The clock began to strike somewhere close at hand, the chimes of midnight, and they came. They walked down the hill in a slow procession, all stepping gravely, all in time, filling the road, five abreast. Bob knew them and knew most of them. In the first row, he recognized Mother Slaughter and Hosea Worthington, and the old Earl who had been wounded in the Crusades and came home to die, and Dr. Trefusius, all of them looking solemn and important. There were gasps from the people in the square. Someone began to cry, saying, Lord have mercy, it's judgment on us, that's what it is. Most of the people simply stared, as unsurprised as they would have been if this had been happening in a dream. The dead walked on row, until they reached the square. Hosea Worthington walked up the steps until he reached Miss Carraway, the lady mayoress. He extended his arm and said loud enough that the whole square could hear him, Gracious lady, this I pray, join me in the macabre. I think that's a good place to stop tonight. So the macabre is a dance that the alive and the dead dance together. It's a nice little wrinkle. I hope they explain more of it at the end of the chapter. That's gonna do it. We only got like 6 days left, so keep doing your work, turn in what you got, take care of yourselves and your families, and keep reading. Have a good night, everybody.